The Sweet Forest Adventure. Once upon a time, in a small village near a vast enchanted forest, there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife. They had 2 children, a boy named Hansel and a girl named Gretel. Life was difficult for them, and they often went to bed hungry. The land had faced a terrible famine, and there were many days when they had nothing to eat. One evening, as the woodcutter lay awake, troubled by how to feed his children, he sighed deeply and said to his wife, "What are we going to do? We have nothing left for the children, and we can't even feed ourselves." His wife, known for her cold heart and ruthless ways, quickly responded, "I have a solution. Tomorrow morning, we will take the children into the heart of the forest. We'll make them a little fire, give them each a piece of bread, and leave them there. We will return to our work, and they will never find their way back." The woodcutter's heart broke at the thought, and he protested, "I can't do that. I can't bear the idea of leaving them alone in the forest. The wild animals would come and harm them." But his wife, not showing any mercy, replied, "Then we will all starve. There's no other way. Either we get rid of them, or we perish together." Her harsh words left the woodcutter with no choice but to agree, even though he felt a deep sadness in his heart for his children. Hansel and Gretel, who had not been able to sleep due to hunger, overheard their stepmother's plan. Gretel cried softly and whispered to Hansel, "It's all over for us. What will happen now?" Hansel, always the brave one, whispered back, "Don't worry, Gretel. We'll find a way. All is not lost." When their parents finally fell asleep, Hansel quietly got out of bed, put on his little coat, and slipped out the back door. The moonlight shone brightly, casting a silver glow across the yard. As he walked, Hansel bent down and began picking up small pebbles from the ground. He filled his coat pocket with as many as he could carry, hoping they would help him and Gretel find their way back home. Hansel, having filled his coat pocket with pebbles, returned to Gretel, assuring her, "Don't worry, little sister. A kind spirit will guide us, and we'll be all right. Now, rest and sleep peacefully." He laid down next to her, trying to calm her fears. As dawn broke the next morning, and before the sun had even risen, their stepmother came in, waking them up sharply. "Get up, lazy children," she scolded. "We're going into the forest to gather wood." She handed them each a small piece of bread. "This is for your lunch," she added, "but don't eat it until then, or you won't get any more." Greta tucked her bread under her apron, while Hansel filled his pockets with more pebbles. Together, they began the long walk to the forest. Every so often, Hansel would stop and glance back at the house. He did this repeatedly, until his father asked, "Hansel, what are you looking at? Be careful not to forget your legs." Hansel replied, "I'm just looking at my little white kitten sitting on the roof, waving me goodbye." "You foolish boy," said their stepmother. "That's not your kitten, it's just the sunlight reflecting off the chimney." But Hansel wasn't looking at any kitten. He was secretly dropping the pebbles from his pocket, leaving a trail behind him. After walking a while deeper into the forest, their father told them to collect wood to start a fire. Hansel and Gretel worked hard, gathering a large pile of sticks. Soon, they had a fire blazing, and their stepmother said, "Now, you 2 children sit by the fire and rest while we cut more wood. We'll come back for you when we're finished." So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, enjoying their bread at noon. They thought they could hear their father chopping wood nearby, but in reality, it was just the wind moving a dry branch in the trees. As the hours passed, exhaustion took over, and they both fell fast asleep. When they finally woke up, it was dark. Gretel began to cry, "How will we ever get out of this forest?" But Hansel, comforting his sister, said, "Wait just a little longer. When the moon rises, we'll find our way home." As the full moon climbed high in the sky, Hansel took Gretel's hand and led her down the path, following the pebbles that glittered like silver in the moonlight. They walked through the entire night, and by dawn, they finally reached their father's house. They knocked on the door, and when their stepmother opened it, she was furious. "You naughty children! Why did you sleep so long in the woods? We thought you were lost forever." But their father, who had been worried all along, was relieved to see them safe. Not long after, though, there was another terrible shortage of food, and once again, their stepmother spoke to their father in bed. "We're out of food, just a half loaf left. There's no choice. The children must be taken farther into the woods this time, and they won't find their way back." The woodcutter's heart was heavy, and he thought to himself, "It would be better to share the last of our bread with the children than to leave them alone in the forest." But his wife wouldn't be persuaded, and her cruel plan was set into motion once more. The woodcutter's wife would not listen to any of her husband's pleas. She scolded him harshly, saying, "If we've done it once, we must do it again. There's no turning back now." The children, however, were not asleep and overheard their parents' conversation. Their hearts sank as they realized what was about to happen. Later that night, as their parents slept, Hansel quietly got up to gather more pebbles, just as he had done before. But the door was locked, and he could not escape. So he went back to Gretel and comforted her, whispering, "Don't worry, little sister. Go to sleep, and God will help us." The next morning, the wife awoke them early. She handed them each a small piece of bread, even smaller than the day before. As they began their journey to the forest, Hansel crumbled his bread into small pieces and tucked it into his pocket. He stopped often along the way, dropping a crumb here and there to leave a trail. "Why are you stopping, Hansel? What are you looking at?" his father asked. Hansel quickly replied, "I'm looking at my little pigeon on the roof, waving me goodbye." "You foolish boy," their stepmother scolded. "That's not a pigeon, it's just the morning sun shining on the chimney." But Hansel kept on walking, secretly dropping breadcrumbs along the path. They walked deeper into the forest than they ever had before, and once again their stepmother built a large fire and told the children to sit by it. "Rest here," she said. "When we're done cutting wood, we'll come back to get you." At noon, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had scattered his along the path. As they sat by the fire, the hours passed, and soon they both fell asleep. But when they awoke, it was night. Gretel began to cry. "How will we ever get out of this forest?" Hansel, trying to stay hopeful, reassured her. "Wait a little longer, Gretel. When the moon rises, we'll be able to follow the crumbs I dropped along the way." But when the moon finally rose, they found no breadcrumbs. The birds of the forest and fields had eaten them all. Despite Hansel's hope, they couldn't find the way home. They wandered through the forest all night and into the next day, growing hungrier and weaker with each passing hour. They could only eat the few berries they found along the way. Exhausted, they finally collapsed beneath a tree and fell asleep. The next morning, they woke to find themselves still lost in the forest, far from home. They walked on, hoping to find a way out, but they only went deeper into the woods. By noon, they were on the verge of collapse when suddenly they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a branch, singing a sweet melody. They stopped to listen, captivated by the sound. When the bird finished its song, it spread its wings and flew ahead of them. The children followed, and soon they came upon a little house. The bird landed on the roof, and as they got closer, they realized that the house was made of bread, with a roof of cakes and windows of sparkling sugar. "We will have a feast," said Hansel, his eyes lighting up. "I'll start with the roof, Gretel, and you can have some of the sweet window." Hansel, delighted by the sweet taste of the roof, broke off a big piece, while Gretel eagerly gnawed at the sugar window. Suddenly, they heard a thin voice calling from inside, "Nibble, nibble, like a mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?" The children quickly replied, "Never mind, it's just the wind," and continued eating, undisturbed by the voice. Hansel, finding the roof absolutely delicious, broke off an even bigger piece. Gretel, not to be outdone, pulled off a large piece of the window and sat down to enjoy it. But before they could eat more, the door creaked open, and an old woman hobbled out, leaning on a crutch. Hansel and Gretel were startled and dropped the pieces of the house they had been eating. The old woman, however, smiled kindly and said, "Ah, my dear children, how did you come here? Come inside, stay with me. You will be no trouble at all." She took them by the hand and led them into her house. Inside, they found a lovely meal waiting for them. Milk, pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. It was a feast that seemed to appear out of nowhere, and the children were so hungry that they ate eagerly. After the meal, the old woman showed them 2 little white beds, and the children, exhausted, laid down and soon fell asleep, thinking they were in heaven. However, despite her kindness, the old woman was a wicked witch who had built the house to lure children. Her plan was to capture them, fatten them up, and then feast on them. The witch had poor eyesight, but a keen sense of smell, much like a wild animal. When she heard that Hansel and Gretel were near, she cackled to herself, "I've got them now, and they won't escape me." Early the next morning, as the children slept soundly, the witch crept in to look at them. Seeing them both so peaceful and rosy-cheeked, she said to herself, "What a fine feast I will have." She grabbed Hansel with her bony hand and locked him up in a small stable behind bars. No matter how much he screamed and begged, it was no use. The witch then went back to Gretel, shaking her awake. "Get up, lazy girl," she ordered. "Fetch water and prepare a meal for your brother. He's locked up in the stable and he must be fattened up. When he's fat enough, I'll eat him." Gretel cried bitterly, but the witch was cruel, and she had no choice but to obey. While Hansel was fed the best food the witch could prepare, Gretel was given only scraps, like crab shells. Every day, the witch would visit the stable and call, "Hansel, stretch out your finger so I can see if you're fat enough yet." But Hansel, clever as always, would stretch out a small bone he had found, pretending it was his finger. The witch, with her poor eyesight, couldn't tell the difference and thought Hansel wasn't gaining weight. After 4 weeks, the witch grew impatient, for Hansel remained as thin as ever. "Enough of this," she cried. "Tomorrow I will cook and eat him, whether he is fat or lean." She turned to Gretel and shouted, "Be quick, girl, fetch water. It's time to prepare the feast." Gretel's heart broke, and as she fetched the water, tears streamed down her face. "Dear God, please help us," Gretel cried. "If we had been devoured by wild animals in the forest, at least we would have died together." "Spare me your lamentations," the old woman sneered. "They are of no use." The next morning, Gretel was forced to get up early, light the fire, and fill the kettle. "First, we will do the baking," said the witch, who had already heated the oven and kneaded the dough. She pushed poor Gretel toward the oven, from which flames were already emerging. "Crawl in," the witch ordered, "and see if the oven is hot enough for the bread to bake." Gretel, realizing the witch's wicked plan, cleverly replied, "I don't know how to do it. How should I get in?" "You stupid goose," the old woman scolded. "The opening is big enough, can't you see? I could fit in myself." And with that, the witch bent down to look into the oven. That was Gretel's chance. In one swift movement, she gave the witch a push, sending her into the oven. The witch stumbled forward, and Gretel quickly shut the heavy iron door behind her, locking it tight. The old witch screamed and howled in fury, but Gretel ran as fast as she could, leaving the witch to burn in the fire. Gretel hurried to the stable, where Hansel was locked up. She opened the door and cried out, "Hansel, we are free. The wicked witch is dead." Hansel, overjoyed, flew out of the stable like a bird escaping its cage. The two siblings embraced each other, dancing around with happiness and relief. They kissed and laughed, so glad to be free from the witch's evil grasp. With no more fear, they explored the witch's house, finding treasures hidden in every corner. Chests full of pearls and precious stones lined the walls. "This is better than flintstones," Hansel exclaimed as he filled his pockets with the treasure. Gretel, not wanting to be left out, filled her apron with as much as she could carry. "Now let's go home," Hansel said, his heart full of hope. "If only we can find our way out of the witch's woods." After walking for several hours, they came to a large body of water. "We'll never get across this," Hansel said, looking around. "I don't see any stepping stones, and there's no bridge." But Gretel noticed something else. "Look, here comes a white duck. If I ask her, she will help us across." And so she called out, "Duck, duck, here we stand, Hansel and Gretel on the land. Stepping stones and bridges we lack. Carry us over on your nice white back." The duck approached, and Hansel climbed onto her back. "Come, Gretel," he called. "You can come too." "No, that would be too hard on the duck," Gretel replied. "Let's go one by one." And so Hansel crossed first, followed by Gretel, each riding the duck one at a time. After crossing the water, they walked on, filled with joy, until they came to a part of the forest that was becoming more familiar. Soon, in the distance, they saw their father's house. Excitedly, they ran toward it, bursting through the door and rushed into their father's arms. They hugged him tightly, tears of happiness streaming down their faces. The woodcutter had not known a peaceful moment since he had left his children in the forest. Every day he worried about them, but he had no idea that the wife was dead. When Gretel opened her apron to show their father, the precious stones and pearls spilled out, filling the floor. Hansel, with a wide grin, took handful after handful from his pockets, and the room sparkled with the treasure they had brought back from the witch's house. At that moment, all their troubles were over. The woodcutter, filled with relief and joy, embraced his children. Together, they lived happily ever after. surrounded by their newfound wealth and the love of their family. And so, the tale of Hansel and Gretel comes to an end. As the story winds down, a mouse runs across the floor and the narrator teases, "Whoever catches it may make a big fur cap out of it." This was the story of Hansel and Gretel, a tale filled with bravery, cleverness, and a touch of magic. Did you enjoy their adventure? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another magical story. Which fairy tale should we tell next? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, keep dreaming and believing in magic.